document dump? What about holding government files, all of which were generated in February? Why are they being held till late November and then dumped on the commission and the lawyers mere hours or even minutes before the hearings?
Well, it's hard to speculate why, or maybe it's a little easy to speculate why. But there's been a bit of an ongoing document dump. It's tough for us to talk about that in too much detail because we're bound by fairly strict confidentiality undertaking. So anything that's not in evidence, we can't speak about too specifically. But let's just say there's been a fair amount of last-minute document review going on in the last little while, and that work has only picked up as the witnesses are getting more and more high level in government. I think just to touch on a point that you made a minute ago, you could hardly ask for a cleaner set of facts here. As it happened, I think this was a confluence of, a coincidental confluence of events in a lot of ways. It just so happened that Justin Trudeau upset a group of people who drive very large and hard to move vehicles. And I think that was important in coincidentally making it easier for them to get entrenched in a way that made it hard to move them along. But coincidentally, too, all of the people that came together at the top of the protest movement happened to be extremely reasonable people who were doing their best to encourage nonviolence. And as we headed into an inquiry into their behavior as well as the government's behavior, there's not a lot to point to that's particularly bad behavior on the part of the protesters, while the same cannot necessarily be said for our federal government. As we've been moving through the hearings, the first stage earlier on, we were hearing from the police whose I guess real dog in the race here is just to kind of pin the blame on another police force. And none of them were particularly argumentative about the idea that they had powers available to them. They had tow trucks available. They arranged for tow trucks. It kind of turned into a tow truck inquiry into a tow truck emergency at one point, where basically every cross-examination we were doing was about whether and where tow trucks were obtained and how much they were available. But the testimony of the police established pretty clearly that there were plenty of powers at common law and statute law outside of the Emergencies Act to handle the protests. It just wasn't being handled properly by, each police force was pointing to some other police force that mishandled it. But as we get into, so that's one of the key ingredients here is in order for the Emergencies Act to be lawfully invoked, there has to be the situation has to be one that couldn't be effectively controlled with existing laws and powers. And the first stage of the emergency established that those powers existed. And as we head into the federal government witnesses, we're starting to get more into the question of whether there was a threat to the security of Canada, as that term is defined in the CCCF Act, in existence as a result of the protests. And what we're hearing so far from government witnesses, and what it looks like we'll continue hearing, is that they've conveniently expanded the definition of a threat to the security of Canada. And it means something other than what it means in the legislation, apparently, to them. And that, I think, is going to be the second piece of why the invocation turns out to be unlawful. And I think we're really getting there at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty plain when every cop says, no, there was little to no danger, and no, we didn't need extra help to solve it. In fact, I forget which witness it was who was saying that the state of alert today is identical to what it was back then in terms of danger. I mean, what a laugh. By the way, Ottawa is still under partial lockdown today. So I think the politicians like drama, and that's one of the interesting things is you see these internal chats amongst politicians, and they knew they were going too far, and they talked amongst themselves, and they never thought that it would be published. They never thought that their text would be revealed. about how they have to gin up narratives, how they have to whip up the January 6th insurrection theme up here, how they had to reach out to their pet reporters to get them to say that this is a dangerous. You could see that they didn't believe it. They didn't believe it was a crisis because they were working to make it look like a crisis that they knew it wasn't. And I think that they're given away by their own internal records. It wasn't bad. They knew it wasn't bad. They wanted it to be bad so they could demonize their opponents as violent. Go ahead.
I think that attempt to demonize in general has been a part of the, it was part of the election platform of the Liberal Party. It's been a part of their, what appears to be their political strategy since at least the election in 2021. I think to those of us who are watching these protests with an open mind, it's hard to see what was happening on the ground in the way that it was portrayed in the media, whatever the term you guys like to use, the legacy media, whatever. Certainly didn't reflect what was seen on the ground. These are legitimate frustrations being aired by Canadians just like you and me, who've been under the boot of their government like never before, and who've decided to come to Ottawa to protest. And the best that the government can do, because they can't admit that they've gone too far in terms of their COVID policy or in terms of the mandates that they decide to impose, the best that the government could do was to paint these people as terrorists or as violent or as racist or as misogynist or all these other things. I think that was apparent to anybody watching with an open mind, but it's really interesting to be in the seat where I'm at and watch the sausage get made a little bit. And it turns out that that's exactly what it looks like they were doing. It's hard to capture that in a specific text or a specific document, but a number of documents are in evidence already that talk about strategizing to get on a narrative of painting these people in a certain way. And there's I can't talk about what's in store, but I can say that there are a few more documents that we intend to bring out.
What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.